Okay, welcome to our 17th episode of Restaurant Dealmaker Show. The Restaurant Dealmaker Show features a prominent person related to the food and beverage industry, either a former client, an RRC agent or broker, or other accomplished person related to the food and beverage industry. This month, we're featuring Laura Van Galen, who I met over 5 years ago, and she has been a wonderful person to be associated with because she has such a phenomenal background. I originally met her as a result of listing her former business, The Phoenix, which she will talk about in depth during our conversation, which is a beautifully designed, for those of you that aren't familiar with, a beautifully designed restaurant, bar, and entertainment venue in downtown San Rafael, which Laura meticulously designed and built from scratch after she acquired the buildings that the venue was housed in. The reason I invited Laura to be the co-host is because she has such an accomplished and diversified background. And at this point, I want to give a brief summary of her background, which she will elaborate during our discussion. For 22 years, Laura was involved in marketing. In 1986, she started her marketing career running marketing for a cosmetics firm in the United Arab Emirates. And needless to say, for an American woman, that is, or for anyone outside of that area, is a challenge. In 1994, she returned to the United States and joined the marketing service group of Broderbund Software. In 2001, she founded Bleu Marketing Solutions, focusing on supporting large businesses to acquire new customers through offline and online marketing. In 2010, Laura created The Phoenix, which I mentioned earlier, in San Rafael. And in 2019, she launched a new version of her marketing business to look closer at the impact of grassroots marketing. She created AreaBeats LLC, going back to the old concept of beat planning at the local level. She currently consults with several clients, and in 2022, she founded Hamilton Art Foundation to build community support to renovate and rebuild the Hamilton Theater, which I know well because I was stationed in the Air Force at Hamilton, and Hamilton NCO Club in Nevada. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please go to the question bar, write in your question, and time permitting, I'll direct the question to Laura during the presentation. So with all that being said, I have the privilege of introducing Laura to you. So Laura, as a start, could you tell us about your upbringing? And let's start from your college years.
So thank you for inviting me to join you guys. I really appreciate it, Steve. It's a lot of fun to, I guess, to talk about yourself sometime, right?
Sure. Well, you have a lot to talk about.
So I went to college at Dominican University, and I had the opportunity to live in Mexico for a while, and I went to Oxford University for a summer session, and my focus was primarily on international studies in the Pacific Basin, Latin America, and business. And fortunately, that journey took me to the Middle East, which you mentioned a minute ago, the United Arab Emirates, where I worked for 4.5 years in the cosmetic industry, and brought me back here when I started to have a child. And, I've been an entrepreneur at heart since I was a kid. I was one of those lemonade stand kids, and sitting there with my lemonade, making maybe I was lucky to get a quarter. And then as I came into the house at the end of the day, I looked at my mom and I said, I'm not making enough money. And I think that was the red flag right there, that I was planning on doing a lot more. I think what's really important beyond my college years is kind of the dappling that I had. I'm kind of a chameleon. So I was able to get exposed in my career to many, many industries and wonderful people, all the way till, sitting at the Ivy with an executive from Pitney Bowes, having an $800 lunch with all the celebrities around me. And I've always loved that industry. I love the entertainment business. So with that in mind, I segued my way to marketing and started to find that the world is made up of microclimates of culture and socioeconomic and political segments. And so marketing kind of is that. It's about the microclimate of the world and everybody living in it. And I used my background to go into marketing and start helping companies to look at how they might be able to get their businesses exposed and built with strong brands and strong messages. So, yeah.
Got it. So how did you actually start your first business? And before you even do that, and include in that, if you could, what was it like for a woman doing business in the United Emirates environment? What was that like?
So my first business, to answer that question, was the lemonade stand. Right. And then it went to, it started my own house cleaning and pool cleaning business as a teenager. I made pretty good money and I bought a brand new car, my MGB, my favorite car, a little convertible by the time I was 15 and a half.
Yeah, cool.
I think my mom felt that I had more money than she did. So that was always funny. And then, my life in the Middle East, I didn't own a business, but being in the cosmetic industry as a female, before I went, I took the time to learn the language and to really understand the culture. The UAE was a British colony until 1971. So fortunately, they were very westernized and used to people from the Western world living amongst them. So it was really a lot easier than I ever expected. The culture, I was able to go with the men and I was able to go with the women because of my education and my business status. So I drove and I did assimilate and I wore, the shela and the abaya, but I didn't wear a burqa. I didn't cover my face.
And that was acceptable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I created kind of an Avon calling style business for the cosmetic company. We took and had beauty parties in the women's homes, and that was very successful. We opened up 2 cities, and I think at one point we had like 16 sales associates, and the business was thriving.
Cool. So how has that industry changed? I mean, from your perspective.
In the UAE specifically, it is a completely different world now.
Yep.
When I left there, the women started, looking more at their independence and getting jobs and, taking jobs in banks and really, starting to explore that. And that's expanded quite a bit. And then, of course, all the initiatives that have been done in Dubai has really changed the dynamic of the country quite a bit.
For sure.
So business opportunity everywhere there.
Yeah, I can imagine. So the marketing world in general has changed dramatically as a result of technology. And so how do you see it today in terms of its effectiveness and the pros and cons of the extent of the technology in the marketing world today versus pre-heavy technology and marketing? What you're thinking on that whole thing?
The marketing world, the dynamic, I started my first, I guess you could say, real business, right, with the marketing company in 2001. And, that was the wild, wild west. Went into digital marketing, you hear everywhere things that are going on, data being, stolen, spam, all the construct of the industry was really like the wild, wild west. And it was a place that enterprises wanted to play in, but it was very risky. So they needed, partners that they could trust. And so I built a platform of trust with my business and facilitated all the problems and tried to screen it out with the experience we had. That is very different than where it is today. Digital marketing is a norm. Social media is a norm. You know, all the TikTok and everything, it's all a norm now. The way that we do marketing is not in the traditional sense. So the other major thing that you see is the microclimates. It's so fragmented and so large. To do a mass media marketing campaign now, you know, you've got 800 television channels, if not more. You know, back in the day when you're dealing with 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 channels, it was more manageable. You know, you could digest it a little more. Now it's like all over the map. So you really have to understand your micro audience and what they're doing. Like, for instance, when I was in the UAE and I was doing marketing for the cosmetic company, we had billboards that went in between Dubai and Abu Dhabi, the two major cities, and we would buy billboards. I tried to do a flyer on cars in a parking lot, and I almost got arrested. I didn't screen it. I didn't screen it through the ministry, because in the United States, you know, you can put a flyer on a car in a parking lot. It's okay. Not
Sure.
there. Everything has to be approved. So yeah, I got a little trouble for that, but they understood I was a Westerner and told me not to do it again and to clear everything through the ministry.
Wow.
So those are little things, you know, that you have to be careful to understand the microclimate and the audience that you're working with.
Got it. So, you know, my familiarization with you came as a result of the Phoenix. And for a lot of our viewers, possibly many don't know the Phoenix. Obviously, if you live in Marin County, everybody knew the Phoenix, but, you know, only a small part of our audience is Marin and the immediate Bay Area. So tell us about the Phoenix, how you got the idea, how you started it, what your ultimate success was with it, because it was quite an institution and, you know, very well, had a fabulous reputation.
So I'm going to take a step back to go a step forward.
Please.
So my marketing business was very successful, and I was starting to think more and more about how I could give back. And it was really concerning me that at the time, but you know, in 2010, it was more of an issue than it is today. But the music industry in Marin had really dissipated with the loss of, you know, the Sweetwater, and which was rebuilt by Bob Weir, but it was still not predominant in 2010. And Terrapin opened with Phil Lesh. So those all kind of dynamically happened at the same time as the Phoenix. I guess we all had the same idea in mind. But because of my digital marketing background, I thought, what an amazing idea to create a kind of beach blanket Babylon experience, a restaurant and bar in an area that is a recording studio that we could live stream onto the internet around the world and show local live music at the grassroots level to people around the world. So that's kind of where it started. I bought this building because it had such a beautiful infrastructure. And the main atrium, even though it was a clothing store, it had very high ceilings and it had the potential of being very recordable from an acoustic standpoint. And so we created kind of this environment. And I don't know if you know much about live recording of music, but you also have to have no light pollution, no noise pollution. So you have to contain the kitchen and the crashing dishes, and you have to contain the people laughing in the bar, and you have to contain the staff as they're moving throughout the venue. You have to be able to control all that if you're live recording and live streaming. Because if you look at a lot of live music venues today that are being live streamed, you'll see there's so much outside pollution in the recordings. It's not enjoyable. And it can be, you might miss key elements of the musicianship as they're performing. And, you know, you've got Larry Van on the drums, who used to play with Jerry Garcia. And you know, he did kind of some bluegrass albums and things like that, and, you know, some backup musicianship for him. And you see just the artistry that he has. That all gets lost in an acoustically contaminated environment. And also the lighting is critical. So anyways, I got really excited. I hired John Stork out of New York to be our acoustic designer. He's very famous and very well known for the amazing, excellent work that he does. And he came out and helped us. And one of the things that I insisted on was I did not want to get rid of the marble floor, because the marble floor was so beautiful.
Yes.
It had the wings of the phoenix as it flew out the door. I mean, the design of the interior is just beautiful.
It was gorgeous.
And so that frustrated all the acoustic people, because, you know, marble floors are not the ideal setup for a recording studio. But they figured it all out with the treatments and everything. And it's probably one of the better recording, live recording studios that's out there in California.
Cool.
For a live audience. Let me put it that way, live audience recording studio.
Yeah. So we all know that running a restaurant and a food and beverage operation is extremely challenging, but adding music to the mix really compounds that challenge. Can you tell us about what it's like trying to run, you know, three components together, the food, the beverage, and the entertainment? How did that whole come together?
Scary, very scary. Because you've got people in the bar and they're having a good old time, because that's why they hang out in the bar.
Sure.
You know, they want to talk to the bartenders, they want to watch the overhead. So what we did was we closed off the bar, and then we put TVs in the bar that showed the live stream of what was happening on the stage, so that they were connected to what was going on. And then in the kitchen, we put the prep area and all the dishwashing on the second floor of the kitchen area. Right. And then we had the line cooks and a dumbwaiter and busing area on the first floor. And that helped to lift it up and away. The only time that we had a challenge is when the door was swinging between the kitchen and the main hall, and they were crashing the plates. We have to try to get them, don't crash the plates, you know. Sure. Because, you know, you have someone like Paula West on the stage, and she's doing this amazing performance, and the door swings and crashing plates, and the chef on the line yelling down the line. You know, you have to keep all of that contained.
For sure.
So the kitchen was very closed off and moved away. And, you know, even today, as any restaurateur, when you first open and do a new idea, you're constantly reformulating. How can I fix this, you know, in the next year or the next year, you know, as you overcome things. But I think one of the biggest challenges you have when you're running a multifaceted business like this, where you're live recording the music, that's key. If you just have a band up on the stage and they're performing, you're not dealing with live video. But like you and I right now on the video, there's a lot of things I can't do. So, you know, that's where things get a little crazy. You know, you've got a customer who didn't get their dish right at the table, and you've got a live performance up on the stage, and you've got a server that's trying to communicate and talk about that problem without creating noise contamination. And then, as servers always do, they like to go off to the side and gossip when they have little breaks. So you have to make sure they have a place to go that's away from everything, so that them complaining about a customer doesn't show up on the video.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have to think about all the different aspects of this business. And then you've got to deal with my favorite part, which is the musicians and all of their needs. So now you have like a little green room or somewhere for the musicians to go, and you have to have structure, because if you allow your musicians to take a 30-minute break, before you know it, you're going to come into the dining room, the whole place is empty. Everyone left. And you need to be able to control the microphone and say, okay, this is who's coming up on the stage. Now they're performing. Now they're taking a break. And you have to tell your musicians, you get to eat before or after the show, but not in the middle. Because big breaks in the middle causes a lot of impact on the customers in the room, and you'll lose money. Yeah. And so you have to control that. And so I have good stories about that.
Yeah, tell us some of the most challenging stories that come to your mind.
Oh my goodness! So there's an artist. I will say no names on the live video, but I'm sure you can improvise. But he belonged to a pretty popular 80s band, R&B, and he flew in from out of town, and we were very excited. The women loved him, so it took no effort to fill the room. 2 shows back to back, all women. Let me tell you, and very, very elegant, dynamic, and sexy guy, right? even at his mature age. And I go to pick him up from the airport, and I'm thinking, okay, we're gonna go straight to the venue. We've got things planned, in the green room to take care of him and make sure he's comfortable and get him to the hotel. Well, he wanted to go to the hotel first and kind of hang out and then show up for the venue. So, but he asked me to make a little stop in San Francisco along the way. And I thought, we're going to go say hi to a friend or whatever. Well, we were buying goodies for the night, so to speak. And I realized I was way in over my head. So we bought our evening, snack, and got back in the car and headed north to the hotel. But he was looking for some deeper entertainment.
Oh, wow.
So I dropped him off, and we had a great night. He did a wonderful job. He was exceptional. But when you're dealing with more, celebrity or famous or popular musicians, you have to listen and make sure that they have a good time, or they won't come in affordably. They'll charge you quite a bit.
Sure. Wow.
Or you'll have a very interesting night. Maybe some things will happen you don't want to happen. So
right.
But I've been in the green room watching dogs, babysitting the dog.
Oh my goodness.
The performers on the stage, and
sure,
I can give you a list.
There are a lot of prima donnas, huh?
And male and female, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure that's the case. Yeah, I can understand now why you don't see that many venues that have, restaurant, beverage, and entertainment because of these challenges that you've mentioned. And from my own experience, we decided we opened up a Zim's restaurant in Hayward. It was an old Copper Penny, and next to it was a former Smuggler's Inn, which was like a dinner house, and they did a huge disco business. And so when we found out after we had spent all this money developing the Zim's in Hayward that they were going to build out this, they were going to sell the Smuggler's Inn, we thought, oh my God, we should protect our turf. So my father gets this idea, why don't we open up and he was very enticed to do this because a Smuggler's business was about 70% beverage business from they had a big disco. Discos were very big at that time. This is in the 80s. And so he thought, oh my God, we'll make a lot of money. This discos we'll do a nice food and beverage operation. And so when we were ready to open, we called Arthur's, my father's name was Arthur's High Food and Spirits. We were ready to open. There was a big line to get in. And all those people were waiting to go into the disco, not to go in the restaurant. So the bottom line is the restaurant never really took off. It was
Yeah.
overwhelmed by the disco.
Yeah.
And all the, the disco customers, the younger people, they weren't interested in spending money and eating in the dining room. They just wanted to go in the bar and have a good time. So we never got that off the ground. So finally, what we did to save our butt on that investment we made, I looked for a very high-powered Mexican. We thought Mexican food would be really good there, and we gave them a limited budget. And we actually did first time we ever did a management contract in our history. We always manage our things ourselves, but we actually did a management contract with this guy. We gave him $100,000 budget to junk up the place because it was too fancy for the market. And it finally took off, and we had about a 4 or 5 year run, where he did a good Mexican food business and, a heavy bar, but got rid of the disco, and that worked. But so I have a little bit of a feel for the challenges of trying to mesh the two. And was very, very challenging, to say the least. So what you sort of highlighted on some of these things, but if you had to underline, what are the main things that make the music and restaurant business so challenging? I mean, you sort of alluded to some of them, but just how would you summarize that?
Well, if you want to get real musicians that are accomplished and good into your venue, you have to build a platform to attract them. And that's where the live stream was invaluable, because we were able to get, even though we only had 175 seats, we were able to get very high-end acts in there, and then we could give them copies of the video. And that really went a long way, because it was free production. And it's cost money to produce. So, you have to think about the dynamic of what type of music do you want and what kind of platform do you want? And then you have to make sure that you're going to make enough money paying the musicians properly. Because if you're always on a budget of $100 per man or whatever, what ends up happening is you get a lot of last minute cancellations if you get good bands, and now you're running around trying to fill that gap, or you're not able to get the better musicians in. And in our particular place, because it was a recording studio environment, if the music was bad, it was bad to the bone. And I'm not kidding. One day we did have a band come in uninvited as an opening band for a very good band, and we didn't know they were coming in. And so we went with the flow, and they got up on the stage, and after one song, we could not have them play anymore, because people were literally getting up out of the dining room and walking outside and waiting for them to end so they could come back in.
Oh my God.
That's the problem with a recording studio. It be bad musicianship, or if they're not ready for the stage yet and they're still working things out.
Sure.
You know right away. So that's the first thing, is building an environment that really works for the musicians. The second thing that's really important is to make sure that you factor in the acoustics, because in a restaurant you want vibrant acoustics so that people don't hang out for 6 hours.
Right.
You want them in, you want them out, they eat, they digest, they leave, and you're rotating those tables. But in this kind of environment, you're charging a ticket price, you're slowing down the service, not too much, but enough to, make it last, that they're ordering multiple courses. And then you're also setting it up where they're ordering multiple drinks, so that it's like turning the table 2 or 3 times, but not turning the table. So you have to factor that in. How do I build my menu? How do I build the management of my dining room to create that constant turn without turning the table? And then the last thing that's always so difficult is, chefs are not easy to hire and affordable for a lot of restaurants. So a lot of restaurants might hire a chef, and then as you become mature, maybe one of your line cooks steps up and becomes the chef, and you're making the food, and you change it out every once in a while, but it's a lot more affordable. But in a music environment, we created, to get people in, constantly coming in, we had to run around the holidays. genres, you know, the birth of blues. You know, you have to have a whole music calendar, and you have to get that up there and out there, and you have to collect all the names and market to those names and keep track of every customer very tightly. Like, I think we had a following of about 33,000 names, all the way from Sacramento to San Jose. And we marketed to them regularly and told them what was going on.
Yeah, how did you market to them?
Well, we collected all the names, whether it was through the POS or online or however, and then we set up, you know, where we loaded them into a marketing database, and we created a newsletter which went out every week telling them what was going on in our place. And that was 6 nights a week. And we were very good at that, actually. And we didn't spend a lot of money, you know, advertising in the local publications, because it gets pretty expensive to do that ongoing. But we were always pressing. We were always connected to the press. Who's coming in, making sure we got regular big names into the place so that people would see that there's a constant flow of press and who's playing the Phoenix.
Sure. Yeah, what a challenge. Wow.
And then, yeah, and then the last part that I think is really critical is the bar, and having a healthy bar program. We used to have, you know, happy hour and then late night happy hour, so that when everyone was leaving the venue after the music, we would get a flow of people that would go from the dining room into the bar.
That's a good idea.
And that's when I wish the bar was bigger.
Sure.
Because the more people you can get in there on late night happy hour, the longer your night goes. But we found that, you know, staying open late didn't work for us.
Yeah.
We were usually closed at least within 2 hours after the last act performed.
Yeah. And what time was that generally when you closed down the place?
It kind of depends on the artist. If we do, you know, more popular artists like Paula West, and she did 2 shows back to back, we would do, oh, that's another thing, turning tables when you do seated shows with dinner and a show.
Yeah.
That's another dynamic. There's a timing that has to be done, and a prep in the kitchen and a controlled menu in order to be able to make that work.
Wow.
And it did work. It did work. We would do that, you know, a 45-minute set, then we would break and clear the room, and then another 45-minute set, and then that was the end of the night. So usually I would say, you know, we were closed somewhere between midnight and 1 o'clock. We didn't stay open until 2.
Yeah, yeah. And Marin is a older population too, but I guess what was the profile typically of your customer?
Well, the customers followed the artists. So it
Right.
depended on who was playing on the stage, and that would draw that crowd. Like, you know, if we were doing Cajun food for a New Orleans band, we would try to put specials that kind of aligned with the type of music for the night. There would be nights where we wouldn't sell one steak. It would be all hamburgers.
Right.
We were getting flooded with hamburgers.
Wow.
And then another night, you know, it was fried chicken.
Wow.
And grits. And so
Wow.
you have to pay attention to your food cost and what's being eaten by the audience, you know, consumed by the audience that's coming in.
Yeah. So if you ever were going to consider doing something like the Phoenix again, how would the format differ from what it was, or would there be any difference?
There were some ingrained issues that I would definitely fix if I were to do it again. And one of them is I would really experiment more with in-table ordering and try to limit the amount of activity with the servers at the table. More in-table ordering. There were times where we would miss a drink order because we couldn't go out in the dining room because the artist on the stage didn't want that, you know, talking and noise pollution, and then we lose orders. So I think I would experiment more with in-table ordering
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I would do is I would look more closely at how we managed the kitchen. And, you know, that's key, because we would lose orders because we did not anticipate the menu for the night properly with the genre. Understanding the genre and what these people are going to order is really key. Whereas with a restaurant, you have a following and they tend to have their favorites, and you're selling X amount of this every night.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in a live music restaurant environment.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, running just a straight restaurant is challenging in itself, but running the kind of venue you ran, it's mind blowing. It's just overwhelming.
Yeah, and then you know, it's like one night is like cocktail night. You have to make all these cocktails, and you and I both know, you know, unless it's, you know, if it's bottled or on tap, you can knock that out. Boom, boom, boom. But now you're doing like, you know, 100 cocktails.
Yeah,
you know, you have to have the right bartenders on the right night and produce the right, and you can do it. It can be all done, but the structure has to be in place.
Yeah.
And the design of the venue has to be in place, or it'll be complete chaos.
How did you find your labor pool? Because Marin has always been a very difficult, challenging labor market. I mean, my father opened his first restaurant in 1953 in Corte Madera. We were operating restaurants till 1995. So like that's what, 40, 50 years. And we always had a problem with getting employees. But for your situation, I would even think there was even more of a challenge. How did you handle that employee capture situation?
It's funny. In the beginning, it was a nightmare. Don't get me wrong. But once you settle in, it turned out that probably 80% of the servers or bartenders that we had, you know, the front of the house, were all either musicians or lovers, big enthusiasts of music.
Oh. And
in the kitchen, that was a whole different gig.
Yeah.
But the labor pool was mostly just ended up being very steady people that worked for us that just absolutely love being there. And
sure.
and the, you know, I mean, imagine you've got this Moon Alice is on the stage and they're performing and it's resonating in the room and you're walking around clearing plates. I mean,
yeah, no, it is exciting.
It's a pretty good a feeling, actually.
Yeah. So switching gears a little here, because you have such an in-depth marketing background, generally, what are the major challenges of marketing at the grassroots level? Because as you know, big part of our audience are food and beverage operators, and they, you know, have this constant challenge of, you know, how do they market their business? And obviously we know technology has changed a lot, and, you know, instead of seeing written restaurant reviews, you know, in the newspaper, which I don't think you see anymore, it's all social media. So what's your whole take on this new challenge level for marketing?
So the fragmentation of media, I started writing about this over 10 years ago. And it started concerning me quite a bit with my enterprise clients. And I started realizing more and more that my company started doing more, you know, customized projects where we would, and this was on the marketing side, not on the Phoenix side, where we would get a project and we would do like a dimensional direct mail piece. I don't know if you know what that is, but, you know, we would get a famous tennis player to sign tennis balls, and we would give away, you know, free tickets to the Open, and, you know, things like that, to sell multi-million-dollar enterprise installs. And we were working with companies like Cisco Systems and Apple Computer and VCE, which is a conglomerate between VMware, Cisco Systems, and EMC. So a lot of high tech, Hewlett Packard, Dell, and we started realizing that the products needed to be sold more in a niche style. And then to get it out there is a whole nother problem, because, you know, now you got the New York Times online and then print, and then, but how many times do they really need to see that? I mean, you know, it used to be 3 times as a charm. Now it's, how many times do people even pay attention to it? We're all flooded. I don't know how many emails you have gotten in this brief time that we're on the.
It's crazy.
You're right. And how much of it do you really is relevant? That's the other problem. Absolutely. You're like filtering through, and you're like, well, delete, right? And oh, wait, that one. And if you highlight a whole bunch and you delete them all, maybe you missed one that you need to read.
Right.
So, and then you've got the spam problem that's gone international. So you've got servers in countries that don't have the CAN-SPAM Act of 2003 compliance, because it's a US act, not an international, right? So they can do whatever they want into the servers. So it's just incredible and overwhelming, quite frankly. So I started thinking, well, how would we get beyond the fragmentation of media? How could we start really helping our clients and even myself with the Phoenix? How can I help myself to not spend myself to death? And at the same time, I need more customers, especially if I'm doing exciting things and new things. So that's when I started thinking more about this old idea of beat planning, because I was in the beat at the Phoenix.
Right.
And, you know, I started thinking about AreaBeats. You know, what about if we isolate the microcosm of every single, you know, product, their audience, their geography, and we start doing more micro marketing and advertising. And it actually started really working, where we would literally buy data, build databases, and market to those specific databases, multi-million-dollar products or not. And it worked. And then, you know, we would do sometimes what we call 360, you know, marketing initiatives, where, you know, you send them a letter, you send them an email, you send them a multi-dimensional product, you connect with them on social media, you do whatever you need to do. You build the plan, right, to go after it.
For sure.
And one of my clients just went from a multi-million-dollar business into multi-billion-dollar business during the time that we work with them. And when we first started out, it was maybe $100,000 a year. By the time I closed my business, we were doing almost $1 million a quarter with them. And then all of a sudden, all the enterprises started bringing their marketing in-house. And we became a dinosaur overnight because they were hiring these teams to do the micro marketing in-house. And they could do it because now you've got Canva and Adobe Spark, and now Microsoft is coming out with their design tool. And you can go online, and now with the AI that Microsoft has done, you can go up there and profile your entire marketing campaign, and it launches it for you.
Wow.
It builds the artwork and launches it for you. At least I haven't had the opportunity to dabble in it yet, but the marketing agency is becoming more of a strategist than an executor. And so I no longer needed 45 employees.
For sure.
So now I'm a strategist.
Right. So again, talking to the food and beverage operators of today, if you were hired to advise them on how to grow their business, what would you suggest to them, marketing-wise?
Well, I mean, I would always find someone on staff that loves marketing, you know, to do. I mean, there's downtime in restaurants. And if you have a good employee that likes to do the marketing, you know, they can give them a little extra an hour, and they could sit at a computer station at the host stand and, you know, help out with the social media and getting it out there. But it's a micro marketing initiative. And overall, it's more than just getting it out there. like recently I was helping a client. I went on to their social media, and they've been spending a fortune with a social media company. I think it's a fortune, for a small entrepreneur, to have them do all the marketing for them on social media. And they only had 3 followers. Wow. One was the owner, one was the husband, and one was the marketing person.
Oh my goodness.
And they were spending all that money to market to those 3 people.
Crazy.
And so that's another problem, is knowing how to build your audience correctly. And then advertising, through social media. A lot of people don't know how to build their communities through Nextdoor. They don't make it easy. So you have to know how to do it. But, every audience is different. Like if we look at Marin, and I love Marin. I grew up in Marin. I'm one of these people. So I'm embarrassed to say, but I'm also proud to say, our houses and our cost of living is quite expensive here.
For sure.
So when Marin people go out, they like it to be free.
Yeah.
And then they pay for their drinks and food. They don't want to pay $30, a couple times a week to go see a performer.
Right.
And so that's one of the dynamics. We would do a blues jam and we'd be at the host stand arguing about, do we have a senior discount? Can they get a break? And they drive up in a, Mercedes or a BMW, and they're looking for a deal, And I don't think it's because they don't appreciate. It's never been that. They love it. Sorry about that. I don't know what I can do about that one.
No, I'm not hearing or seeing anything.
Oh, okay, good.
You're getting some disturbance on your side.
No, I have a fax coming through. I didn't.
Oh no, I don't hear a thing. No problem.
So that that also produces the part of the beat planning. You have to know your local audience, and then you need to be able to communicate the value of what you bring to the table, so that you don't have the problem of making money.
Right.
You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So, on the blues jam night, if they're arguing about the cover at the front desk, then maybe you have to give them a little something, like a little piece of paper that says, they get a complimentary something at the table.
Sure.
Then they feel that trade-off. But, usually the way we used to pay the bands quite a bit was a percentage off the door.
Right.
And if we didn't collect the cover, then the bands would get upset because they're getting gypped.
Right.
So it becomes a vicious cycle.
Sure. So if you had to do your, different parts of your career over again, how would you do it differently? And what would that look like? So
maybe I'm just getting started.
Yeah. What do you do? What do you tell the group what you're doing now?
Well, I had 4 companies, and a special needs child came into my life in 2015. So, I thought he was going to be chronic special needs, and so I trimmed back the fat, so to speak, closed everything down, and simplified my life. And by 2019, I had pretty much cleared the queue by August of 19. And what's amazing is we ended up in the pandemic. So every morning I got up, thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you. But then he started going to school and, doing pretty well. And now, he's going to school till 3 o'clock and he's high functioning in the world. So he's much, much better than we ever expected.
That's good.
So now for 2024, I'm really, maybe even as early as this fall, I'm looking for, more something interesting new that I'd like to do. I've been doing the AreaBeats and I have about 6 clients. I do consulting, and I'm also doing a nonprofit foundation. That was my first time forming a nonprofit. We have 164 volunteers, 7 committees, and a board, and we're working actively to get a lease to renovate the Hamilton Theater. It's a beautiful old theater here in Hamilton.
It's beautiful.
320 some odd 6-seat theater that has been abandoned and left to fall apart for 30 years. And the city of Novato doesn't have the funds to renovate or take care of it. So it was under surplus land act, was being looked at for a housing project. And we spoke up and said we'd really like it to be a community theater where we could showcase opera and, you know, make it a performing arts theater. And it has the potential of being quite magnanimous. And then next door, there was a building they took down that we'd like to have rebuilt using grant money. There's quite a bit of grant money through historic preservation. And this theater is it's registered with the Library of Congress. So it's considered a historic monument.
Oh,
and
nice.
we'd like to rebuild the building next door and make it an experiential music museum.
Oh, nice. And
put Marin artifacts in there and really rebuild and create kind of like an art hub here in Hamilton. There's already the MoCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art, is there. Mm-hmm. And Unity in Marin is a religious organization, but they're very musical. They have a lot of musical activities there and weddings and stuff. So it would be really amazing. And then you've got the Hamilton Amphitheater, which is an untapped facility. It's designed in a Grecian amphitheater style, and the acoustics are amazing. The birds love it. So cool. The birds get it for free.
Oh, that's great. That's a challenging project. They're lucky to have you with your expertise at the helm to put that together, that project.
Yeah, so I'm working with the Golden Gate Opera right now. We're on September 9th from 3 to 5 p.m. We are actually putting on an arias and you know, musical performers coming in, opera singers for an opera we're calling it Opera in the Amphitheater.
Oh, nice. On
September 9th from 3 to 5. And we have Richard Riddleman coming in from France. We have Shawnette Salker. I can't say Olga's last name. I think it's Chernystiva. And Joe Myers, the tenor. It's going to be amazing. And the Fenwick Foundation gave us a grant, so we are about 75% funded for the event, which is wonderful.
Well, good luck with that. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, so that should be good. So that's what I'm up to right now.
I'm sorry?
That's what I'm up to right now.
You're keeping out of trouble, as always.
Yeah,
that's for sure. So unfortunately, we're running out of time here. So Laura, if anyone would like to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
So you can always go on to areabeats.co, areabeats.co. It's a long story about the .com. But anyways, you can always fill the contact form out there. My email address is L Van Galen. It's like Van Halen, but with a G, at AreaBeats with an S.co. And you're welcome to call me. I have a phone that you can call me on through the business, 415-717-4466. And I'm always really excited to talk to people and learn about what they're doing.
Great. And all I can tell you is that it'll be a wonderful experience for anybody looking for some creative marketing ideas to network with Laura, because she has, as you can tell, you just got a smattering of her background, and it's very unique and very diversified, and she's very knowledgeable. And Laura, we thank you very much for your participation today. Really, I always enjoy talking to you. Always learn something. Thank
you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We always learn something new. I always learn something new when I talk to you. I wanted to just make a few announcements. Our next Dealmaker show will be on August 24th, and I'm going to be gutsy enough to try doing a solo. And I'm going to be discussing the 10 essential principles a buyer needs to know in purchasing a food or beverage business. which I'm not going to cover it all in one session. It will be numerous sessions that'll be spread over, several months in between other guest speakers. On October 21st, Andrew Rogerson of Rogerson Business Services, who I've known for years and is a fellow member of the California Association of Business Brokers and the International Association of Business Brokers. He is a business broker, and he's an expert in business acquisition and sales for 26 plus years. He's a 5-time successful business owner and author of 4 books. He's also a fabulous speaker, and his presentation will be accentuated by his fabulous Australian accent. Our October show, we're going to feature Michael Baker. Sort of a unique situation. I had Louise, who was the seller of Pizzalina, and on the show a couple shows ago, and now Michael, who was the buyer of the restaurant, is going to be on the show. And he bought Pizzalina during COVID 2021, just towards the end of COVID. And Michael is under construction for a second Pizzalina unit in Walnut Creek. And Michael's prior experience included being the executive chef at the Chalet restaurants, which had 5 restaurants doing $21 million in sales. And he was the executive chef at Piatti in Danville and has a very in-depth chef management background. So it'll be very interesting to hear a perspective of a buyer and a transaction that we have done before. And on our November show, we're going to have our own Jeremy Brockman of Brockman Communications, our marketing director. We'll be talking about cutting-edge marketing techniques to assure our company and others will continue to be competitive now and in the future. So with all that being said, again, I want to thank you very much, Laura, for your participation today. And thank you all for joining us, and enjoy the summer. And most importantly, everybody stay well. Again, thank you so much. Take care, Laura.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you.